Hello, everybody, and welcome to Snacks with an Expert, Delegation, Engagement, and Accountability with expert Steve DeVries. My name is Sam Charette, and I'm the event coordinator of Spark offices here in Manchester, New Hampshire. We offer an innovative co-working space designed to bring together people, ideas, and workflow in a unique industrial space. And we also happen to be a proud sponsor of Snacks with an Expert event series. Steve is a certified business coach and executive coach, and he works with technology-based OEMs, manufacturing companies, and B2B service providers to improve their business. Team management, operational excellence, and strategic planning are just some of the areas that he focuses on with his clients. And today he's going to share with us the secrets of how you can get your time back by delegating. So without further ado, our expert today, Steve.
All right. Thank you, Sam, so much. I really appreciate it. Hello, everybody. I am Steve DeVries, and I am a business and executive coach. I would love to tell you all about my career and what brought me to becoming a business and executive coach, but I'd rather just share a little bit of a story or some of my beliefs as to why I'm here to talk to you about delegation and engagement and accountability today. So my personal feeling is that everybody ought to be able to go to work and have the opportunity to enjoy themselves, right? There ought to be some level of fun, and people shouldn't have to dread going to work. And if that's accomplished, that sort of creates a ripple effect in their world, right? So if you're a good manager and you have a good day, that's going to project to your team. And if your team has a good day, they're going to go home and that's going to project to their family and friends, and so on and so forth. It's sort of like a ripple on the pond. So you drop a pebble into the pond and hopefully you have this positive impact. And that's why I do what I do. I want the business community to have that positive effect rippling across their worlds. And so that's a little bit about why I do what I do. And to make that world better, I'm going to talk today about delegation and engagement and accountability. So off we go. So delegation, it's all about increasing productivity, as Sam mentioned. And before I go any further, I'd like to thank Spark for inviting me in here today. Totally blew that one. Apologies. So delegation, increasing productivity. It's all about selecting the best person and ensuring the best results. So this presentation is going to be in 3 parts. We'll talk about delegation first. So this is the agenda for section 1. I am not going to read the whole thing through to you. We will touch on every single one of these items. And the first one, what's most important? So for anybody that works with coaches, you'll know that we have an acronym for everything. And the word most is going to come up quite a bit. Before we get to that, I'll just share this couple of quotes. So delegation it's just about a group of people who have been tasked with a specific job or the act of assigning a specific task or purpose to a person or group of people. I love this quote. When you delegate a task, you create followers. When you delegate authority, you create leaders. And so as we go through this, it'll become more clear the difference between tasks and delegating authority. So here we go with the acronym. So the word most begins with the letter M, right? So as we think about our mission when it comes to task delegation, it's all about how do you want to be seen by your customers and employees. That's part of your mission. In objectives, the O, we're talking about which objectives do you wish to achieve. The letter S is all about strategy, right? Which strategy do you follow to achieve your goals? And the last one is tactics, right? It's all about implementing your strategies. So we're going to come back to this slide a few times during this presentation. So when I talk about things that are most important, keep in mind that we're talking about mission, objectives, strategy, and tactics. So delegation is a way to allow you to focus on your most important activities, and we're going to get right into it. So builds confidence. right, in your strengths as a manager. It also builds confidence in the people that you delegate to. People can learn through delegation. It strengthens networking and overall the organization, right? So the better you are at delegating to your team, obviously there's a lot of communication that goes on with that. We'll get into some specifics on how that works. But it brings the organization together in that if you're delegating tasks or projects that align with the company's mission, objectives, strategies, and tactics, it will bring everybody together. So it's not just about handing off a piece of work to somebody so that you don't have to do it. It really should be aligned with what you're trying to accomplish for the entire business. So differentiating between what's high value and what's low value is definitely a process, right? So how do you do it? A couple of different tools that you can use. The first one we refer to as Pareto's Law. Sometimes people refer to it as the 80-20 rule. So it teaches us that 20% of our efforts typically creates roughly 80% of our results. So if you think about that for a second, maybe you'd want to increase that 20%. And then with zero-based thinking, that topic suggests that getting rid of tasks that aren't effective, it just doesn't contribute to your mission, objectives, strategies, and tactics. So the idea here is figure out what your high value activities are, and then look to delegate some of those lower value activities. And when you're able to do this, it frees up your time to put more effort into the high value activities. A little bit like printing money when you can find more time for yourself. So when you're delegating, the idea is to do what you do best. High value activities, you know, there's just, you got to make sure that you're spending your time there is the simplest way to put it. And the way I like to help people understand what is a high value activity. So think about the amount of money that you get paid, right? Or that you would like to make. And then think about the activities that you're doing. And if you wouldn't pay somebody else the same hourly rate that you want to make, then that's not a high value activity, right? Sometimes there's things that we can't avoid and we just have to do it. But in general, you want to be thinking about things in terms of, would I pay somebody what I make to do this particular task? And again, if the answer is no, that's a great candidate to start thinking about how to delegate that. So you want to delegate to somebody that has demonstrated some relevant competence. We're going to talk a lot about relevant competence in the next section of the presentation. But when you start thinking about what is competence, it's not just skills. Skills matter, but it's also about an attitude, a willingness. It needs to fit within sort of the growth goals of an individual. They want to show motivation, right? So these are all elements of people that could be good to delegate to. And you want to think about the best interests of the individual that you're delegating to, yourself, the company or organization, as well as the project or the task itself. Think about it holistically so that as you choose who you're going to delegate to, assuming you have a choice, then if you're acting in the best interest from all of those aspects, then you're moving in the right direction. So defining the task clearly, it's super critical in terms of delegation. Here's an example. So taking out the trash is delegating, right? But if you don't say something along the lines of, I need you to take the trash out tonight because the pickup is coming in the morning, and if we miss it, we're going to have to hold the trash for another week. Now you're getting a little bit more specific. You're talking about not just the what, but the when and the why, right? So those are all important pieces of delegation. So you want to make sure that you're crystal clear with everything as it relates to what it is you expect to be done, right? And I love this last bullet, create inspiration. So how many times have we either heard or said or thought, when you ask somebody to do something, they go, why? And that visceral response is because I said so, right? I mean, anyone with kids would that'll resonate with you. So giving people the understanding of why it's important that you're asking them to do what it is that you're asking them to do is really critical, because it makes them feel important. They feel a part of something. And this is something that really goes overlooked because we're always in a rush, right? We are the boss and we just want you to get it done, right? Pure and simple. So don't forget this part, because people will become more connected with what you've asked them to do. Timing matters. Setting deadlines that are clear, right, about when you want this particular task to be completed, absolutely important. If you're working with someone that has a pretty good feel for the task, and again, we're going to talk a little bit more about the individuals that receive delegated tasks later, but you can ask them how long they think it might take to get this done. And you can have a little bit of an exchange around not just when, but how you're going to get there. So establishing benchmarks and how to gauge progress. These are all elements of delegation that need to be part of the conversation. So resources. This is one for any business that may have multiple departments, right? So thinking about resources in terms of people, in terms of tools, in terms of finances, anything along those lines. Talk about what's required to get it done and who has access to those resources. So the person that you're delegating to, you may not want to give them full access to spending a certain amount of money that is going to be required to get this done without sign off, right? So you need to make sure that they understand what they're authorized to use for resources or not. And then seeking agreement across multiple entities, multiple teams, departments, so on and so forth, that could be impacted by this task or project, or could be impacted by the resources that are being used, is something that needs to be considered when you're delegating in, say, a larger organization, right? Because everybody's always fighting for resources. They're not always abundant. And so making sure that all the tools that are needed are basically agreed upon, and people know what they can and can't do with that. Agreeing on consequences. And I love the word consequences, right? Because it always has it conjures this negative connotation, right? We think consequences as punishment. But let's talk about it in a different way for a second. When you delegate, sharing consequences can also be about, sorry, thought I saw something change on the screen. When you're talking about consequences, it can be about the impact to the organization, right? If the project doesn't get done on time, or if it doesn't get done the way that we laid it out, what does that mean? What's going to happen to the business? And then what could that mean when it comes to the individual's performance review? What could it mean to the manager who's actually doing the delegating? Could that person, have some trouble if things aren't done properly? So making sure that we understand what the consequences are and seeking agreement in order to move forward, and understanding that we're going to operate with these consequences or potential consequences is also a part of effective delegation. So does everything that you delegate need to be in writing? The answer is no. Something simple like taking out the trash, you don't need to put that in writing. Although if you're at my house and I ask my son to take out the trash and make sure that you put a new bag back in there when you're done, and put it in a barrel, and don't leave it laying on the garage floor, and maybe grab the trash baskets from the other rooms, maybe then I need to put it in writing. But no, simple things like that, they don't have to be put in writing. But it's a good idea to put things in, when we're talking about corporate America, put it in bullet point form and send it out as a memo or as an email. Or if you're dealing with outside contractors, definitely you want to have a scope of work and some sort of agreed upon statement of work, that sort of thing. You want to be flexible, right, when you're delegating something, but then make sure again that it's in writing when it tends to be a little bit more complex or it's a critical project in your business, and then make sure that the person receiving that delegation or that task, that they are in agreement, right? Get that confirmation from them. If you're sending it an email, just ask them simply, can you please respond back that you got this and that you understand? Sounds a little bit like CYA, and yeah, that's true. There's an element of that to this, but that's the world that we live in. So make sure that if it's critical, you're putting it in writing. I like this. Inspect what you expect. You can't delegate something and then not go back and check on the results, right? When things go, that's how things get overlooked. That's how things go wrong. That's when you have that situation where it's like, I thought it was all set. I thought you said it was done. Well, yeah, I thought it was done. If you're the manager and you're not checking out what's been delegated thoroughly, then you're missing something here. And I would advise strongly against that. And the other part about delegation, this first bullet, delegation is not abdication, right? So when you delegate something, the idea is that you're not throwing it over the wall, right? As much as we would love to say, yep, gave it to somebody else, not my problem. The reality is as a leader, as a manager, it's still your responsibility when you delegate something. If it goes wrong, it shouldn't be because the person didn't execute it properly. It's because you didn't manage it properly, right? And so now we're back to talking about consequences. But effective delegation is all about owning that and making sure that you're checking things along the way to make sure that you're getting the desired results. We're going to talk about how to do that in the next couple of sections. But this is something that don't just assume that it's done, because it's not always the case. Anybody in the room here have any questions or doing okay so far?
Really good so far.
Thank you.
Defining the why you're asking for the task to be done after you've clarified all the details of the task. And then defining why you're asking for it. Does that link, is the reasoning for that in my mind, that links back to what you said at the beginning, where we're creating leaders by delegating authority. So you're sort of teaching them
Yes.
the reason why we're doing it. Okay.
You hit the nail on the head.
Cool. All right. Just want to make sure I have the right page before we move on.
Yeah, no, perfect. Well, let's get right into it then. So this next section is about engagement, right? So I mentioned earlier task relevant maturity of an individual or competence of an individual. That's what we're going to talk about in this section, and how to adjust your style to meet that individual, because not everybody that you delegate to is made equal. So let's talk about that a little bit. So we're back to our agenda for section 2. What's most important? Why engagement matters. And we just went through 10 principles. I'm going to give you an 11th one. And we're going to talk about low, medium, and high task relevant maturity and what you need to do about that. So we'll run through this. So our mission when it comes to engagement, we want to think about it in terms of how does this assignment fit into the employee's career mission? Objectives. Do the tasks and requirements of this assignment fit with the employee's growth plan? Strategy. Will this employee see this assignment as a strategic opportunity for professional growth? And do these tactics fit their skill sets? Engagement is a workplace approach resulting in the right conditions for all members of an organization to give their best each day in pursuit of organizational goals, adhering to organizational values, and motivated to contribute to organizational success, all with an opportunity for individual professional growth. That sounds really pie in the sky, but I promise you it's absolutely achievable. We talk about, or we We open pretty much every publication these days and hear about quiet quitting, right? But engagement is a real thing and it is achievable, and we don't have to live with quiet quitting. And quite honestly, I think this is the solution to quiet quitting. So employee engagement, none of these should be earth-shattering to most of us. I like the part here where it builds employees' confidence in their abilities. So when you're effectively delegating and you're building somebody to be something more than they are today, right? You're helping them build a future, and that when you see that confidence brimming, besides the professional aspect of things, it really is personally gratifying when you as a manager are building your team members' confidence. And then everything else starts to fall into place after that, right? Employees become aligned with what's happening in the business, and they're okay with accountability, right? Because they're feeling confident. Usually when you see people shy away from being accountable, it's because they're not confident in what's going on. And I think that the way to fight that is make sure that they understand exactly what's expected, give them the confidence to go achieve it. And then, to Jenna's point earlier, right? You're no longer just giving them a task, right? You're giving them some authority. This is another one. We give a lot of lip service to things like this, but it's true. Employees who believe that management is concerned about them as a whole person and not just an employee are more productive, right? And so if you think back to what I said at the very beginning about why I do what I do, I want people going into work in the morning excited about getting there, and I want them going home feeling satisfied, right? Sometimes we have bad days, and I get that, but overall, if everybody were feeling pretty positive about their work environment, I think the business world would be a heck of a lot better place. So I think that's what the statement alludes to. So talking about task relevant maturity, right? We can think about this just in terms of the word competence, right? You're going to delegate tasks or projects to people that are either low, medium, or high on this scale in terms of their competence. So we're just going to talk about the low side first. So if someone has a relatively low level of competence when it comes to the task at hand, typically that person is going to be either a new hire or maybe they just got promoted into that role. They're going to require a lot more of a directive style than a collaborative style, right? And for those of you out there that fear being a micromanager, this is not what we're talking about. This is not micromanaging. This is simply giving them the path forward as opposed to allowing them to develop themselves. We're confidence building. If you give them the opportunity and they don't have a high competency level and you ask them to just go off and do it and figure it out, well, they're not going to be very confident. It's likely that the results aren't going to be very strong, and nobody's going to be happy, right? So spell it out what you're looking for, have frequent follow-ups, and have some strong oversight along the way. Make sure that they understand that it's okay to ask questions, right? All along the way, you're soliciting questions from them to make them feel safe, right? How many times in our lives have we been asked to do something and we were afraid to ask a question because we didn't want to look like we didn't know what we were doing, right? That should not be the case. As a manager, your job is to make people that you're delegating to feel comfortable and understand what's expected of them. So encourage those questions and sort of be present for them in that way. The delegation process for lower competency individuals, make sure your goals are clearly defined, right? Have it written down. Always go back and revisit expectations. Make sure, are we clear, right? Asking that question, are we clear about what needs to happen? Schedule frequent check-ins. Really, really important. If you've got a multi-step process, you don't want to just let them go and then check back in with them at the end. That's not what this person needs. This person needs you to sort of take a peek along the way, make sure everything is good, right? If there's small course corrections that need to be made, there's small course corrections. You don't want to wait to the end and realize that you've got to go back and do it all over again because you failed to document and make clear what your expectations were, right? And then, define how that's going to ultimately help them in their career. You want to make sure that they understand that it's not just about what's good for the business or what's good for you. They need to know what's good for them. This is an employee's labor market, right? And they have choices. It's no longer good enough as a manager to have the mentality that they should just show up and be happy that they have a job. You want to make it real for them. So make sure that that's part of your delegation process as you go through it. So then when the project is done or the task is done, you want to go through a little bit of a debrief, right? Give them some time and then have them come back to explain how they thought the project went. Ask for that feedback, give feedback, ask them if there's any lessons that they learned along the way, and then talk about what's next, right? If an employee does a good job, if you've delegated something to them and they're feeling pretty good about it, they're going to be excited. They're going to want to know, what else can I do? Right? So if at all possible as a manager, be ready to say, yeah, you know what, in the next few days, few weeks, or what have you, we're going to have another project similar to this, and we'd love for you to work on it. Now we're back to that, keeping them engaged and excited position. All right, so medium task relevant maturity or that medium competence level. So we're going to start ratcheting up things in terms of autonomy when it comes to handing off these tasks or these projects. So this person is going to be a bit more experienced. They're going to have a track record. They're going to have some demonstrated abilities. You're not going to be guessing quite so much as to whether or not they're doing things that are in their wheelhouse, right? They may have some limitations, but they're also going to have some judgment skills. Right, you're gonna rely on some of their judgment and their abilities in order to lay out the project plan. So with the delegation process, similar to the low task relevant folks, you still want to document. You still need to make sure that your goals are really clearly defined. You want to have them confirm back the assignment to you, right? It's a little bit less directive, but make sure you're confirming expectations, and then you are setting up some type of frequency as it relates to checking in along the way. You may not need to check in nearly as much as with someone who's kind of new at all of this, but have a conversation and say, I'd like to be able to check in, a couple of stages along the way. What do you think makes sense? Right, and then have that conversation. So this person is now part of the process and they're feeling good that they're not being micromanaged, that they do have that autonomy, and you're not wasting your time needlessly checking in. Final bullet, dual interests, just like we talked about before. Why is this good for you as the manager? Why is it good for the business? But most importantly, why is this good for the individual carrying out the task? Why is it important? What could this ultimately do to help them along the way? So as before, we're going to do the debrief process. We're going to share information, ask for feedback, give them the feedback, lessons learned, and what's next? What could be coming down the line? So we're seeing a lot of similarities here, except that the amount of time that you're spending as the manager starts to decrease. And that's a good thing. That's what we're looking for. So now we get to the rock stars, the high task relevant maturity people, the ones that we would love to have a full staff of, but it just never seems to happen that way. These people have significant experience. They've been in your business a long time or in a company just like yours. They have very strong decision-making capabilities. You're comfortable with them using their own judgment. And generally speaking, the types of projects that you're going to delegate to them, they're connected to much higher level objectives in the business or the organization than, you know, people who have only been in their role for, you know, a few months or a couple of years, right? So you don't want to delegate easy work to these folks. You want to challenge them. So in this case, because you know that they can get done what you're asking them to do, it may not be necessary to document something unless you happen to be challenging them, and if you know that you're challenging them, then I highly would recommend documenting what's expected. The rest of this, it's going to be very much collaborative, give and take. You want to talk to each other about the objectives, the expectations. There's going to be open feedback in both directions, right? This is someone that you really trust. So you don't need to do a lot of directing. You need to do a lot of asking and saying, here's what I need. How are you going to go about doing it? Let them lay out the project plan for the most part, and then you sort of sign off on it as the manager. And again, at that bottom, those actually bottom two bullet points, visibility. These people want to know that what they're doing matters and is going to be seen. If we're in a larger business and there's, you know, senior management or corporate involved, they're going to want to know that that their name's going to be attached to it if it goes well. That's a huge motivating factor for these high flying employees, and it needs to be connected to their career, right? If you ask them to do something that is going to have absolutely no impact whatsoever on their career, assuming they're career motivated, you're not going to get away with this too often before they up and leave, because you're not doing something that's helping them advance. Remember, they want to be you, or maybe they want to be higher than you. Either way, you just want to make sure that you're keeping that in mind. So when you're done, similar debrief process, sharing of information, lessons learned, all of these things are relevant along the way at every level in your organization. And then talking about what's next. Any questions, thoughts?
I like that you broke it down by types of people you would be delegating to. Because when I think of delegating, I think of it kind of as a whole. And I think breaking it down by type of person changes the way you would delegate.
Agreed. Yeah, it's all about knowing your people, right? If you know your team, you know your people, and you know how to manage them, then you're ultimately going to be set up for better success, right? And that makes you as a manager look better. It makes the employee look better. It builds trust, right? It keeps people engaged. They're going to want to stay in that business long term. Whereas if you throw them to a pack of wolves, maybe that was okay, you know, years and years and years ago. It's not okay today. They'll just get frustrated and say, I'm out. I don't want to deal with this, and I don't have to deal with it. So yeah, it's all about making it real for that individual. Okay, last section, accountability. So how to create a culture of accountability. So we've built up the delegation, we've built up the engagement, and it's now time to make sure that people are held accountable. And this is a part where that I personally think separates good managers from poor managers, is holding their staff accountable. If you've done the first two steps, then this last step should go pretty smoothly for you as well. So we're going to talk about what's most important again, why accountability matters. I always like to close with barriers, right? What's going to prevent you from having accountability? So we'll get into that a little bit. So interesting definition. You know, a lot of people think that accountability is about catching someone not doing their job or telling on coworkers or making everyone, you know, submit stacks of reports just to prove that they got the job done. But it's not, right? It's about creating a positive atmosphere where employees understand how their responsibility, or they understand their responsibilities, how it can create a reactive or avoid creating a reactive punitive culture. You know, where getting things done is simply just a way to avoid retribution, right? That's not what you want your employees thinking. It's really a way to set expectations when you define the company's mission and vision and values and goals. It means holding all levels of employees responsible for accomplishing organizational objectives. I like this one. People are more inclined to pass the buck than they are to take responsibility. It's absolutely true. Accountability at work it's important, but it also needs to be balanced with the need to give employees autonomy in their roles. So back to your observation, Jenna, the autonomy piece. They need to feel empowered to do their job so they can take ownership. They need to strive for excellence. This type of culture, it builds accountability, and it's going to make for a high performing organization. So what does it mean to be accountable? It refers to, an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility for your actions, right? So when we take responsibility and we take ownership to ensure that things are getting done properly, that's what it means. So when you're focused on accountability, you're building a goal-oriented culture, right? And this process balances direction and autonomy, and it allows flexibility and assignments and to the individual. So when accountability is embedded in a culture and employees are aligned with the organizational goals and objectives, things are running a heck of a lot more smoothly, right? But regardless of your role in the business, accountability promotes each individual's participation in the process. And that's what we're talking about, right? Whether you are the CEO or you're, working at an entry level position. If everybody is held accountable for what's expected of them and you're all part of the process, now you're talking about a culture of accountability that really everybody can hold each other accountable. So we're back to our MOST acronym. So in terms of mission, how does accountability play a role in career performance and evaluations? Right? For objectives, our employees who demonstrate accountability rewarded and recognized. Another big one, right? We haven't done enough of that over the years in many companies. And for those that aren't doing it, it's time to start thinking about that or just actually take action. Strategy. Is accountability part of the strategy, follow through, and results orientation? Absolutely needs to be. And then does the organization make accountability a fundamental part of the culture? So everything you do, are you being held accountable for it? So the benefits of accountability culture, you're building trust, you're improving performance, right? You're creating predictability and dependability. And it's a strong culture, right? And when you talk about compliance and consistency, compliance can be a lot of things, but it depends on your industry. But pretty much every industry has some level of compliance that they need to deal with these days, right? So when you hold employees accountable for doing what they're supposed to do, they trust each other, right? It allows people to depend on each other. Whether that means meeting deadlines or completing their tasks or feeling comfortable enough to approach a coworker or manager for help, right? Sometimes we need help. And I think we need to understand that if we're going to be held accountable, we should do everything we can to ensure our own success, right? That means being comfortable enough to ask for help sometimes. It can be hard for employees to ask for help, but making it safe for them, it builds trust and strength in teams. Leading with transparency, communicate openly, and treating employees fairly with the guidance of policies and standards that apply to everyone, right? So how many times have we heard about people getting special treatment because they happen to be a rock star? I don't personally subscribe to that. I think there's other ways to reward people, but I think being consistent in terms of standards and how people are treated is important. Let's see. So the greatest benefit of accountability in business is it's the increase in efficiency. It's a productivity boost. When employees know who's responsible for what, it eliminates confusion, right? It saves time. It allows individuals to meet clearly defined expectations. It boosts their confidence, right? Tying accountability to performance means you actively pay attention to process and results by fixing poor efforts and rewarding successes, right? We've heard stories all our lives about people not necessarily doing the best work, but still getting, the same pay raise as the person that does really well, or the same bonus, right? And it's because the company hasn't set up a comp structure or a performance evaluation structure properly, right? They haven't tied it to accountability. And then giving feedback, right? When an employee turns in poor work or fails to meet expectations, you have to educate them on that. You have to talk to them about it. You can't just let it slide. You can't go back and fix it yourself and never have that tough conversation. You've got to understand how to have those conversations. You have to let them know that it wasn't good enough, and you have to show them how they can do better the next time. So a lot of employees report that their biggest frustration with the workplace is lack of accountability across the company. So if you're an employer and you're losing people and you're not quite sure why, take a look around. Maybe you're not holding people accountable. Maybe there are people doing poor work and the high performers are leaving because those people aren't being held accountable. By establishing meaningful goals and building trust through support and encouragement, you empower everyone on the team, right? And when an organization's cultural values include honesty, and people can address issues without fear of blame, and to work with the team to move forward positively, people win. This last bullet, walk the talk. This is for all the leaders out there. You got to walk the talk. You can't ask your middle managers to hold everybody accountable, right? And then not hold yourself accountable. So here's a plug for all of the executives out there that if you don't know if you're being held accountable or not, or you're not holding yourself accountable, that's what people like me do. And there's more of us in the audience. I know that. We are your accountability partner. We're the ones that can tell you, or at least ask questions to make you realize you're not doing what you're asking everybody else to do in your organization. So if you're struggling with accountability, that's a perfect opportunity to seek support. Me personally, as a leader of an organization, I've always informed my employees, this is what's expected of me. And if you don't see me doing that, you should feel that it's okay to ask me why. Do it politely, but make sure that you're holding all of us accountable, including myself, right? And it makes it a whole lot easier when you stand up in front of your team during a quarterly town hall and let them know, here's what you expected of yourself and your own performance and how you did. It shows that you're human. It shows that you're basically doing to yourself what everybody else is expected to do as well. So walk that talk, people.
That comes up with the honest assessment
Mhm.
and that communication, that debrief, that back and forth
100%.
of, hey, look, this is what, and making sure that communication is clear. Because you may say brown and I say, well, it's more coffee colored. We're saying the same thing, but not able to agree on what that means.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. So I mentioned compliance earlier. So why is accountability important when it comes to compliance? So a lot of industries operate in a very complicated landscape. There's a lot of laws and regulations and standards and guidelines, and there's more and more every single day, right? So companies' compliance depends on accountability in business. Holding employees and teams responsible for their decision, behaviors, and actions, it directly impacts your industry's compliance. So ensure that people are having effective decision making and problem solving. Means that you're working with integrity, right? Accountability reduces your risk of fines, lawsuits, oversight, or other consequences of non-compliance, right? All the things that we never ever want to have to deal with as a business. And when those compliance officers show up at our door, and we all cringe and have to deal with it. When we have a culture of accountability, it means that we're better able to handle those situations or avoid those situations altogether. So, barriers to workplace accountability. Creating this culture can be really hard. And there's a lot of challenges along the way, right? So the biggest issue, a lack of clearly defined priorities or vague expectations. Holding people to become accountable becomes impossible, right? If you're vague. So sometimes it's just a lack of accountability for individuals who fail to meet expectations, or accepting the unacceptable. Follow through is critical and requires a tremendous amount of consistency from both leadership and employees. Remember, I talked earlier about delegation, not abdication. That's what we're talking about here, right? You've got to follow through. You can't throw it over the wall and make it somebody else's problem and not go back and look at it again. And again, I just talked about it, but I'm going to talk about it again. Leadership has to walk the talk and hold itself accountable. Mostly hold itself accountable for holding everyone else accountable, right? So if your entry-level or mid-level employees don't see you as the leader of your business, holding your mid-level managers accountable, right? What message does that send? Definitely not a good one, and it means you don't have a culture of accountability. So make sure that you're holding everybody accountable as the leader and standing up and holding yourself accountable as well. Town halls are a great way to do that. I highly recommend them. So we've talked about delegation, right? The key to performance and productivity. We've talked about engagement, the key to developing a strong workforce. And we've talked about accountability, the key to getting organizational results. That is the end of today's presentation. I would love to stay connected with all of you. I swear I will never send you any spam. I don't even have a newsletter, so I promise no spam from me. You can see what I've done and what I think about things on LinkedIn, but definitely use that QR code to stay connected with me. Love to keep the conversation going. And again, thanks to Spark and everybody here for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Well,
Awesome,
thank you
David.
so much, Steve. And thank you so much, David, for joining us. Stay tuned for some more Snacks with Experts events. We post them on our website and on Eventbrite and on Facebook.